You're listening to The Philosopher's Note on the Thresholds of the Mind. More wisdom in less time.
Hi, this is Brian. Welcome to The Philosopher's Notes on Thresholds of the Mind, your personal roadmap to success, happiness, and contentment by Bill Harris. Start with a quote. The human brain has the quality of plasticity or malleability throughout life if it receives the kind of stimulation that allows it to grow and adapt. End quote. That is Bill Harris in Thresholds of the Mind. Neural plasticity. Don't you just love the fact that, yes, it's a fact, that we can literally rewire our brains? It makes me giddy to think about the power we have to shape our minds, to raise the thresholds of our minds. We do that and we'll more effectively meet life's challenges and live with more consistent joy, creativity, peace, and all that good stuff. Bill Harris, the author of Thresholds of the Mind, is the creator of HoloSync, which happens to be my absolute favorite self-development tool at the moment. In this note, we're going to take a quick look at some of the many big ideas from his great book. It's packed with ideas that hit the cutting floor as I squeezed a handful of my favorites into these brief 6 pages. Including, we'll look at an exploration of what's up with meditation, how HoloSync can get you meditating like a Zen monk in minutes, why you should care about that, and a bunch of other big ideas for our, quote, roadmap to success, happiness, and contentment. So I say, let's jump right in. We'll start with the first big idea, meditation. What's up? Quote, the innate duality of the brain is made more acute by the fact that in virtually all people, the 2 hemispheres are unbalanced, a state called brain lateralization, end quote. All right, so by this point, most of us know that we have a right and a left hemisphere in our brains. Broadly speaking, our left side is logical and analytical, while our right side is holistic and intuitive. Sweet. Now, did you know that for most of us, our hemispheres are unbalanced? Yuppers. This state is called lateralization. And, quote, the greater the lateralization of the brain, the greater the feelings of separation. And the greater the feelings of separation, the greater the stress, anxiety, and isolation. End quote. Fascinating. So how do we get our brains to be more in sync? Well, one powerful way, meditation. As Harris says, quote, whatever the technique, the effect on the brain is substantially the same. Synchronization of the 2 brain hemispheres. And, after much practice, an experience of connection with the rest of the universe, accompanied by profound inner peace and happiness. Any kind of focusing will bring about a degree of brain synchronization. The greater the focus, the greater the synchronization, and the deeper the meditative state. End quote. Very cool. I always knew meditation was powerful, but I never knew why. So, any technique or practice that focuses our brain will bring about a degree of brain synchronization, and this synchronization is a good thing. Got it. Now, let's look at brain wave patterns, the next big idea. Quote, as we slow the brain wave patterns from beta to alpha to theta to delta, there is a corresponding increase in balance between the 2 hemispheres of the brain. This more balanced brain state is called brain synchrony or brain synchronization, end quote. Alrighty. Do you know we can hook our brains up to an EEG, that's an electroencephalogram, and measure the electrical patterns of our brain? It's pretty cool stuff, and I'm looking forward to doing that with my own brain someday. There are 4 primary brain wave patterns, each with different attributes. So in the PDF, I have a fancy little chart here where I talk about or I demonstrate in a grid delta, theta, alpha, and beta, and the qualities and associations of each of these states, as well as the electrical frequency, the hertz of each state. So delta is 0.1 to 3.9 hertz. The qualities are dreamless sleep, autonomic physical and nervous system responses, and the collective unconscious. Theta, a little bit faster, is 4 to 7.9 hertz, and this is associated with dreaming sleep, enhanced creativity, memory, integrative experiences, and deep meditation. The next level up is alpha at 8 to 12.9 hertz. And the associations in this brain wave pattern are relaxation, learning, meditation, pre-sleep or pre-waking drowsiness, and introspection. Then the next up and the fastest brainwave patterns are beta. Those range from 13 all the way up to 100 hertz. And the qualities and associations with this state are alertness, arousal, and cognition. The higher end, anxiety, uneasiness, distress, fight or flight. So the interesting thing to note here is that, as Bill mentions above, as we slow our brains down, our brains become more synchronized, which we just learned is a good thing. When you shut your eyes and take a few deep breaths, you slow your mind down from beta to alpha, and you experience the gains associated with being in alpha state. You can see the notes on the relaxation response for a look at the science behind the positive benefits of being in the opposite of the fight or flight response, and you can see the notes on the Silva mind control method of mental dynamics for more mojo on another way to play with alpha. For now, know that the deeper you can go and maintain consciousness, the better. And that, quote, even very advanced meditators attain the theta state for only moments at a time, end quote. And this is where Holosync's magic comes in. Next big idea, Holosync, what's up? Quote, Oster's paper described a method using very precise sound waves that allowed a person to create any desired electrical pattern in the brain, including the practice of meditation, end quote. Okay, so in October 1973, a researcher named Dr. Gerald Oster published an article in Scientific American sharing his discovery that we can create any desired electrical pattern in the brain, including, very importantly, the practice of meditation. In other words, by putting one sound in one ear and another sound in another ear, you can drop a person into the same state as an advanced meditator. That's really cool. Let's hear more about what Bill Harris has to say about that. He says, quote, using certain precise combinations of sine wave tones, Holosync creates in the listener the electrical brain wave patterns of deep meditation, causing the two sides of the brain to communicate in a new and beautiful way, end quote. To put it in perspective, a Tibetan monk who's been meditating for decades can get into theta for brief flashes. Holosync can hold you in that state in minutes, allowing you to receive the benefits of decades of meditation in a fraction of the time. And when that happens, your brain is literally reordering itself. Quote, you can think of it merely as a way of reordering your brain to accept life's challenges and opportunities with greater equanimity and without fear, end quote. And as your brain evolves to higher and higher thresholds of what it can handle, quote, problems fall away, not because they are solved or understood, but rather because they become irrelevant, end quote. So I'm going to leave you to explore the book and website for all the details of the science behind the technology and its effects on our brains' minds. But I'll say this, I'm on day 200 plus of my hour-long Holosync meditation practice as I'm recording this, and I've covered 1,000 big ideas in the notes I've done so far. And if I could recommend you follow only one suggestion, it would be to meditate with Holosync. It's been that powerful for me, and I have no doubt that if you invest your energy into it, you'll see phenomenal results. If you're interested, go to holosync.com and learn more. And if you sign up through the link in the PDF, I will get a commission. And this is the first product I've believed in enough to, besides Philosopher's Notes, of course, to endorse. So that's how strongly I feel about it. It's an awesome practice, an awesome technology, in my opinion. For now, let's explore some of the other big ideas from the book. Running marathons and meditating is the next big idea. Quote, using Holosync is like running. You can run only a relatively short distance in the beginning of training. No matter how gung-ho you are, no matter how eager you are to be in great shape, you don't run a marathon in the first week, end quote. I love that, both as it applies to using Holosync and as a general metaphor for self-development. No matter how gung-ho we are, if we can only run a short distance right now, there's no way we're going to run a marathon tomorrow or next week. It's just not going to happen. That goes the same with any aspect in our lives. It takes time to see results. As Epictetus, the classic Roman Stoic philosopher, says, no great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me that you desire a fig, I answer you that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear fruit, then ripen. End quote. As my Vipassana meditation teacher, S.N. Goenka, says, work diligently, diligently. Work patiently and persistently. Patiently and persistently, and you're bound to be successful. Bound to be successful. I love that. And as Harris says, quote, I know that it took persistence and discipline over a long time to achieve the benefits I received. End quote. So, are you trying to run a marathon in some part of your life where you should probably just be getting good at running the first mile? Remember, quote, no matter how gung-ho you are, no matter how eager you are to be in great shape, you don't run a marathon in the first week, end quote. Seriously, what's one area in your life where you're trying to go too fast? How can you embrace the process more and realize your results will come with diligence, patience, and persistence over the long run? Good thing to press pause and think about. And when you're ready, we will move on to the next big idea, which is raise your threshold. Quote, instead of trying to get rid of experiences that happened in the past, instead of trying to get rid of emotional stuff supposedly buried inside you, all you really need to do is raise your threshold. Then what used to derail you can't do so anymore. Raising the threshold attacks the problem, sensitivity to stress, at the root, and bypasses the treatment of symptoms, the results of which are almost always temporary. Then the symptoms, depression, anxiety, fear, anger, substance abuse, self-sabotage, confusion, and many others, evaporate of their own accord. End quote. Harris calls this the principle of threshold, and he also says, quote, you have a personal threshold for what you can handle from your environment, the level of which depends on how your personal map of reality is constructed. All dysfunctional feelings and behaviors are really attempts to cope with being over threshold, end quote. And he says, quote, people with a high threshold for what they can handle remain happy, peaceful, and centered even when around difficult people or in difficult situations. Because raising your personal threshold for what happens treats the root cause. It offers the possibility for ending all dysfunction, and doing so permanently, end quote. T. Harv Eker talks about the same idea in his great book, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. You can see the notes on that. He says, imagine you're a person with a character of 3 on a scale of 1 to 10. You encounter a size 5 problem. You're stressed, right? That problem's bigger than you. Now imagine you raise your threshold and become a person with a 10 out of 10 character. Do you even notice the size 5 problem? Same thing here. We want to raise our threshold so that the stuff that used to freak us out has no impact anymore. This is where we want to play. Quote, eventually, a person's threshold becomes so high that nothing can really disturb their peace of mind. Yeah. All right, the next big idea is resistance creates the suffering. Quote, it isn't that change is painful, it's our resistance to the process that creates the pain. End the resistance and the discomfort ends. End quote. The idea that resistance causes our suffering is a very big theme to Harris's work. It reminds me of Dan Millman and Byron Katie and Dale Carnegie. Dan Millman in The Way of the Peaceful Warrior says this, pain is a relatively objective physical phenomenon. Suffering is our psychological resistance to what happens. Events may create physical pain, but they do not in themselves create suffering. Resistance creates suffering. Stress happens when your mind resists what is. The only problem in your life is your mind's resistance to life as it unfolds. End quote. Byron Katie's book, Loving What Is all about, well, loving what is. You can see the notes on that one. She says, quote, I realized that it's insane to oppose it. When I argue with reality, I lose, but only 100% of the time. That's genius. She also says, quote, if you want reality to be different than what it is, you might as well try to teach a cat to bark. And in his classic, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, you can see the notes on that one as well, Dale Carnegie says, quote, Professor William James, the father of applied psychology, has been dead since 1910. But if he were alive today and could hear this formula for facing the worst, he would heartily approve of it. How do I know that? Because he told his own students, quote, be willing to have it so. Be willing to have it so. He said, because, quote, acceptance of what has happened is the first step in overcoming the consequences of any misfortune. End quote. So what are you resisting in your life today? Can you step back and see that it's your resistance to whatever is happening that's causing the suffering? Really, really powerful thing to be able to see. And while you're looking into that, let's move into the next big idea, preferences versus attachments. Quote, not resisting what is does not mean that you cannot want to change what is. And the difference is one of attachment to the outcome. A person who is attached to the outcome suffers if he does not get the outcome he wants, whereas the happy, peaceful person prefers the outcome he wants, but is not attached to it. If he gets a different outcome, he remains just as happy and peaceful as he was to begin with. His happiness comes from within and does not depend on what goes on around him. End quote. I heart that. Preferences versus attachments. Genius stuff. All right, the next big idea, developing resilience. Quote, resilience can be learned, but it can't be taught. Paradoxically, if you teach someone the rules for being resilient and they attempt to follow them, they cannot become resilient. Resilient people are not rule-bound. Instead, they deal with each situation with a flexible approach that allows them to choose the most resourceful way to be or behave in that situation. They respond to the world based on the outcomes they want, rather than on whatever rules they were taught by parents, teachers, friends, the media, and the general culture. End quote. That's really cool. And so is this. Quote, not surprisingly, people who are resilient have many seemingly opposing, flexible patterns. They don't have to obey all the rules all the time and can adopt one posture or point of view in one situation and the opposite posture or point of view in another. There is no inner voice in them that says that rules are more important than success, survival, or happiness. They are both kind and selfish. They can be deceptive and honest. They can be open and guarded. They have a paradoxical two sides of the same coin collection of traits, such as selfish-unselfish, pessimist-optimist, sensitive-tough, strong-gentle, and distant-friendly. They have emotional flexibility. End quote. My friend Dan Siegel, author of Parenting from the Inside Out and The Mindful Brain, likes to say that flexibility is like a river that runs between the banks of chaos and rigidity. On one side of flexibility, we find ourselves too planned, rigid, and unyielding. On the other side, we're too chaotic, not enough structure, etc. The key is to flow between the banks of rigidity and chaos, and the only way we can do that is through our own experiential learning. If we try to learn some rules, we're going to wind up in rigidity. Now, the second half of that powerful second paragraph reminds me of Maslow, who, studying the most psychologically healthy and actualized people in the world, said this, quote, the dichotomy between selfishness and unselfishness disappears altogether in healthy people, because in principle every act is both selfish and unselfish. Our subjects are simultaneously both very spiritual and very pagan, and sensual even to the point where sexuality becomes a path to the spiritual and religious. And he also said this, Maslow, quote, duty cannot be contrasted with pleasure, nor work with play, when duty is pleasure, when work is play, and people doing their duty are simultaneously seeking pleasure and being happy. If the most socially identified people are themselves the most individualistic people, of what use is it to retain the polarity? If the most mature are also the most childlike, and if the most ethical and moral people are also the lustiest and the most animal. End quote. Powerful stuff. The next big idea, pain and suffering can be optional. Quote, the implications of finding independence and being the artist of your own life are staggering. Here's one of them. Because you create the world you inhabit, pain and suffering really can be optional. Only when you acknowledge your role in your life and understand your own power is there the possibility of improving your situation or creating a different story. If you see yourself as a passive character acted upon by and then reacting to external forces you neither understand nor control, you then become a helpless victim. End quote. That's brilliant and a huge theme of the book. Are you a reactor or victim, or a witness and creator? Very important distinction. Check out the book for more, along with my note on the power of TED, as well as my note on the 7 habits of highly effective people. This is habit number 1, by the way. Be proactive. Okay, the final big idea is how to assign meaning. Quote, here's an interesting exercise to help you become more aware of how you assign meaning. Whenever you feel unhappy or distressed, ask yourself what meaning you've placed on what seems to be causing your suffering. Consider what other meanings you could give the situation that would allow you to be happy. The meanings you give to things have consequences, so choose wisely. End quote. As Bill says in a quote I'm going to read in a moment, actually I'll read it right now. He says this, quote, nothing has any intrinsic meaning, but if you're going to place a meaning on what is happening, which meaning would you want? The happiness meaning or the unhappiness meaning? It is your choice, though most people don't realize it is a choice. This whole discussion and the whole idea that you could really choose to be happy and peaceful may sound utopian to you. Becoming conscious enough to notice when you're suffering, to notice what meaning you've placed on a situation, and to consciously change that meaning doesn't come easily. Powerful stuff. Nothing has any intrinsic meaning. It's all, as the Buddhists say, empty. The only meaning anything has is that which we give it. Check out my note on the diamond cutter for more on that, by the way. And knowing this, when we feel unhappy or distressed, we have the remarkable power to step back, see the meaning we unconsciously gave to the event, and choose to consciously select a meaning that would allow us to be happy. That's really powerful. So pause for a moment and consider something that's stressing you out right now. Whether it's a challenge with money, a challenge with a relationship, your health, whatever. Check in and ask yourself if there's another way to look at the challenge. One game you can play is to create a spectrum from 1 to 10. 1 being the worst way you could view it, 10 being the most positive way you could view it. First, rate your current perspective 1 to 10, and then see if you can gradually get to 10, and repeat the next time you're feeling feisty. All right, I hope you enjoyed this quick look at a great book, and if you're feeling it, get the book and invest in HoloSync. Trust me, it is amazing. All right, some of the other notes I think you'll enjoy. The Philosopher's Notes on the relaxation response, on the Silva mind control method of mental dynamics, on loving what is, the Philosopher's Notes on Ken Wilber, the power of TED, Abraham Maslow, and the 7 habits of highly effective people. So how about a little bit about Bill Harris and then some of the quotes from the sidebar. Bill Harris, the author of Thresholds of the Mind, has been involved in personal development for over 35 years as a seeker, teacher, public speaker, author, musician, composer, therapist, workshop leader, and business owner. A student of ancient and modern research into the nature of the mind, he has studied and practiced a variety of traditional and modern transformational techniques and approaches with a variety of teachers. You can learn more about Bill and hook yourself up with HoloSync at holosync.com, HOLOSYNC.com. All right, how about some quotes? These are all from Bill Harris. He says this: most of all, you are no longer in a hurry because you are content in each moment, even if you aren't there yet, whatever that is for you. The inner journey is full of interest, full of rewards. When people realize, at least theoretically, that the chaos they fear is the prelude to positive change, it sometimes helps them to relax. When they're able to look at the process as a continual cycle of death and rebirth, and remember that the cycle is painful only when they identify with what is dying, it often eases their distress. Next quote is, In studies at UC Berkeley in the 1970s, researchers placed laboratory mice in enriched environments containing mirrors, swings, ladders, little tunnels to run through, and so on. Later, when the researchers studied the brains of these highly stimulated mice, they found them to be much larger and more complex and containing many more types of cells associated with intelligence than the brains of mice that had not been stimulated in the same way. In a similar way, holosync audio technology creates a super-enriched environment for your brain, encouraging new connections, complexity, and resiliency that otherwise would not develop. Friedrich Nietzsche says, "One must still have chaos within oneself to give birth to a dancing star." And Bill Harris says, "Transformation doesn't necessarily reward watchfulness. It does, however, reward daily practice." He also says, "Personal evolution takes time and work." And finally, he quotes a researcher who says, "I go to the dentist once a year to see how my teeth are doing, but I don't think of going to the neurologist to see how my brain is doing. Clearly, our brain is more important than our teeth. We can have false teeth. False brains are not around." I love that. So, how are your teeth doing? How's your brain doing? And are you doing everything you can to increase the thresholds of your mind? Think about that and definitely get into meditation, whether it's holosync or something else. Highly recommend taking the time to find stillness, connect to that highest part of yourself, whatever you call it. And yes, fully get your mojo on. All right, I hope you enjoyed and looking forward to sharing more with you soon. Have a great day.
We hope you enjoyed this Philosopher's Note. Please go to www.philosophersnotes.com to download more.